2 seconds.
Well, I think we are ready to go. Welcome to everyone to today's session, last day of the World Childless Week. The theme of the session is Involuntary Childlessness, Liminal Spaces, Redefining Hope, Identity, and Agency to Change. My name is Parampota. I'm a career development professional, researcher, and wearing also too many hats. I'm based in Qatar. I am investigating career as an adaptive coping mechanism for women with experiences of reproductive trauma and how this can shift organizational life paradigms that can ultimately support the creation of more inclusive, equitable workplace and policies. My personal experiences with infertility and involuntary childlessness have influenced much of my work, and it is an honor to be with all of you today to celebrate another World Childless Week and discuss also with two other inspiring colleagues, Professors Christina Archetti and Gail Leatherby, how involuntary childless women may approach life and leverage the power of career to find purpose, craft new paths, and enable achievement. Christina is a professor of political communication and journalism at the University of Oslo in Norway. She is also a trauma psychotherapist, activist, and involuntary childless woman. She has been researching involuntary childlessness for a decade with a particular focus on its existential and experiential dimensions. She is also an ambassador for World Childless Week since 2018. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you.
And Gail Leatherby is an honorary visiting professor at the Universities of Plymouth, Greenwich, and Bath in the UK. A sociologist by background, she has been studying and writing about reproductive disruption and non-motherhood for almost 4 decades. Gail's doctoral research from 1990s was specifically concerned with the identity and experience of infertility and involuntary childlessness. And since then, alongside other academic work, she has conducted a number of research projects on non-motherhood, on reproductive loss, and on pregnancy and early motherhood. Gail has been recently recognized as one of the World Childless Week champions for 2025-2026. Congratulations, Gail, and welcome on board.
Thank you.
So I want to start our discussion putting some parameters to understand what we are discussing. And the first of which is, what is career? I have to admit that the career development industry still has a long way to cover to raise awareness that career is so much more than talking about jobs. Career is a social construct that affects the lifespan of a person from the early developmental stages till the time we leave this world. It also colors the many different roles we choose to take up in life, those of a learner, a child, a parent or not, spouse, housemaker, and more. It also influences the way we choose to show up to the world, and that includes our working life, the connections we make with our colleagues and teams, as well as how we are seen as contributing members of our society. Career also has strong correlations with our identity and the decisions we make in our personal, professional, and social life. And after many years pouring my heart in trying to conceive without success, I came to the realization that this endeavor was not going to be met. So in 2019, I went back to school, to the university, and I started an executive master's program. And while I was trying to find the topic about my thesis, I wanted to investigate a little bit more about my experiences, trying to become a parent, being also a professional woman, a leader in my industry, and how these all come together under one roof. So that's how I came with the idea of investigating the impact of infertility on women leaders' career aspirations. And in order to do that, I conducted a qualitative research I had 7 women from around the world who were all very successful in their working domains, who were all had experiences with infertility. What came out from these discussions primarily was trying to understand the experiences that they had encountered, not only as women, but also as professionals. Many of the stories that I heard back then while I was conducting my research was that they were trying very hard to do their best in order to meet what they had to do from a medical point of view, while also being present in the workplace. Many of them, they had to fly across the world, going from one continent to the other. And during the flight time, they had to take their injections with fertility hormones. They had also, many of them, to conceal the fact that they were going in between work appointments to the doctor's appointment. They were taking also time off their annual leave in order to undertake medical procedures. And much of the realities that they had experienced, they could not share with anyone, sometimes not even with the people closest to them. Half of the women that I interviewed actually were able at some point to create the family that they were dreaming of, either by successfully having another round of IVF or by adopting a child. The other half, unfortunately, were not able to materialize the dream of motherhood. So one of the most important things that came out of this research was the role that career was playing, coping with the reality that they could no longer pursue the dream of having a child, and also to overcome the situation that they were dealing with. And career played a central role for them to be able to move forward. Half of the women also were able to receive mental health support, and that had a very significant impact on their resilience and also the psychological safety they were afforded actually by their loved ones and some of their trusted colleagues in case they decided to share these experiences in their working space. And how this played for them an important step forward to continue dreaming and aspiring for something better in their lives. One of the common themes also that was striking for me and for them eventually was that they all left the organizations they were part of at the time they were trying to conceive. And the reason for that was that their personal values were not aligned with the values of the organization. They could not find support in pursuing their dreams, as well as support while they were undergoing all these different procedures. They were often sidelined because of their non-parenthood roles and how these were seen in the workplace, as well as that they wanted to really channel their energy and their heart into something meaningful. And that was the first time that I stumbled upon the notion of career as a transitional object, as a coping mechanism. It was also this research and the findings of this research that they informed a specific idea, or rather a model of infertility giving birth to change. Because if you consider that infertility is the inability to conceive, then how it can give birth actually to change. But it did. And so some of these findings, we're going to discuss them not in an academic fashion, but rather as experiences, lived experiences with Gail and Christina. And here I want to start the conversation and bring them both to the spotlight by asking the first question. and that goes both to you, Gail, and Christina. If you can share more about your work and your personal interest on the topic.
Christina?
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm a researcher, and I guess research has been a major help in me processing the experience of infertility. So, I mean, that's how I got interested in the topic of this webinar. So, thank you again, Sini, for organizing this. But as I tell everyone, I got into the researching about childlessness as an accident of life and history. And I was doing research about something completely different. I was writing about terrorism of all topics at the time when the change happened. And I started researching about childlessness to cope really with my own experience, to try and make sense of it and to try and make sense of the trauma of infertility. So I didn't know I was traumatized back then, but I started using research to try and find words to express what was happening, to understand actually what was happening, not just to me, but also to other people. And so that's why I wrote my first book about childlessness in the age of communication, where I tried to explain why there is so much silence around this topic, why there is a stigma, why there is taboo, even in the age of communication, where supposedly we are able to, all of us have a voice because there is social media, right? There is always somebody listening to us. But of course, this is not true. And so with this book, I was trying to do many things, yes, and I know that Sini will send a list to Stephanie, and so there will be a list also of resources that you can consult for free and you can access, including this book. So I was trying to do many things, like reclaiming the childless experience from a childless perspective. I wanted also to put the childlessness on the research radar. Of course, it was already there, thanks to Gail, who is really a pioneer worldwide of this topic. But yes, I felt like this needs to be, there needs to be more academic voices out there that talk about childlessness as a topic in itself, in its own right, rather than non-motherhood. And particularly, I'm interested in the many repercussions, existential repercussions of not having children across the entire life course, because childlessness doesn't stop when you stop trying. And yes, and I wanted to challenge the medical narrative, which sees childlessness as a problem and sees childless bodies as bodies to be fixed. So can we look at this from a different perspective? We are not wrong, and yeah. So that was part of my agenda, and this requires also a different way of writing, a writing that expresses emotions and humanity. In the whole experience rather than the dead language of medical terms and statistics. So I don't know whether I'm taking too much time. So I also trained as a psychotherapist, and I was able to train as a psychotherapist and to take this step in actually understanding more of my trauma because I actually engaged with the emotions of my own trauma through the writing. And now the dissertation of my psychotherapy education was also published as an article that can be accessed for free about how infertility, the trauma of infertility connects with the previous traumas, also from our past. And that's why sometimes it becomes so difficult to deal with and we feel unable to draw a line under it because it's complicated by many other traumas. And now I'm writing a new book that is precise about the trauma of infertility, understanding the experience of involuntary childlessness. That is written in three voices: me as the researcher, me as the woman, and me as a therapist. And I deal with the questions: how do we investigate an experience that is traumatic, and so by definition is outside the reach of our consciousness? And so how does the world look like when you are in the trenches of trauma, when you are traumatized by infertility? And then also, how do we heal from the trauma of infertility?
Fantastic. Thank you, Christina. Gail.
Well, I had a miscarriage 40 years ago this year. And to my knowledge, that was the only time that I was ever pregnant. And I was working at that time as a nursery nurse. In preparation, I thought, for all the children that I was going to have. So I felt that I couldn't do that, at least for a little while. And I never went back to it, obviously. And I went to the local night college to try and find something to do. And I eventually signed on for A-level sociology after saying, what's sociology, to the person who tried to suggest that I might like it. And then I went on to do a degree and a PhD. And my first solo project, which is often a student's first project, was my undergraduate project. And that was on women's experience of miscarriage. And then, as Cindy said, my PhD was on experiences of infertility and involuntary childlessness, mostly women, but not completely. I did speak to some men too. And although I had 6 respondents, I think, I interviewed 26 women and 6 or so men. And I also exchanged letters with more than 50 people. It was before the days of email and all that. So they were letters that came through the letterbox. And although my PhD was obviously very much about those people, I wove my own experience through the PhD. And that wasn't that common in those days, as it were, in the 1990s. It wasn't that common to write autobiographically. And I did get some criticism. I went to a couple of conferences and I wrote a couple of papers, which got some advice and some criticism to leave myself out. But I just felt that I couldn't do that, because I felt that the data would not, and the accounts I was producing would not have been so honest if I hadn't reflected on the significance of my own experience to the experience of the people who I was reporting. And in my PhD, for example, I asked people to self-define. So I asked them to self-define as infertile, involuntarily childless. And I wouldn't necessarily have defined them all in the way that they define themselves. And equally, they wouldn't necessarily have defined me in the way. So that was an interesting kind of part of the thesis. So yeah, I spent 36 plus years or so writing about childlessness and loss, and about loss more generally. So as life has gone on, and as things have changed for me, and as the world has changed around us, I've started to write and reflect on other issues that I think are related. So I've been married twice, and my second husband died in 2010, and my mum, who supported me through innumerable losses, including this one, died in 2012. And as a way of coping, I started to write fiction and memoir. And then I found I was writing about my childlessness as well as about my relationship to the people that that had just died, that I just lost. And very quickly, I began to realise, actually, this might be an interesting thing to embed within my academic work, and to tell academic stories in different sorts of ways, to have a bit more of an impact beyond the academy. So that's something that I regularly do now. I write fiction and memoir, both for work within the academy and outside of it. And during COVID, I live on my own now, I got particularly interested in the difference between solitude and loneliness. And the fact that solitude can be a positive and a creative thing, and not necessarily a negative thing. So in recent years, I've also started to reflect and write quite a bit on issues of home, on living alone, on growing older as a childless woman, and all of what all of that might mean. And in addition to my PhD, I have done a couple of other projects too. One, interestingly, on non-mothers at work and how they might be perceived by colleagues, particularly in higher education. and a couple of further projects on pregnancy ending, miscarriage and other pregnancy endings.
So much to still learn from you, Gail, and thank you for all your contributions through the span of these 4 decades, almost 4 decades. We touched a little bit from your sharing about your career, but I want to be a little bit more specific about the role career played for you in coping with your reproductive trauma. I know for myself, during a time that I wasn't even able to get out of bed after so many failed IVF rounds or losing a pregnancy, the one thing that prompted me to stay sane was to focus on what I wanted to do next. What can I do? And career has played a particular role of bridging my grief with a more hopeful outlook on life. So I would like to hear from you, Christina, and from you, Gail, what was the one thing that career did for you in relation to your trauma?
Yes, I must say that career didn't just do one thing. And in fact, the role of career has evolved throughout my journey. And so at the beginning, career was, I mean, I can compare it to a floating device at a time of crisis. So something I could hang on to really for my dear life and to survive from drowning, because I felt really like the experience I was going through was incredibly overwhelming. And career, career, so my job actually is what gave me something to do, a purpose. So I had deadlines. So yeah, even in a way, I felt like nothing made sense anymore, but somehow you have things to do. You have a list, you have to go through the list. And so you just go forward. And I think that was very important to keep me going. But then something happened, and I started using my career. Actually, something happens, so you need to start using it. So the career won't save you by itself, but you can use it. So I started using it to actually research what I was going through, and particularly trying to find a new language. I called it a language of feeling in the body, because I was trying really to interrogate, what am I feeling about this? Can I really put it in my writing? I mean, like Gail, I was also using my own experience. So can I write my own experience together with that of the interviewees and others? But I was trying really to show, what does it mean? What does it feel like to be childless, to go through this? And through that interrogation of my emotions, I could actually connect to them. And that made a huge difference. You mentioned earlier how many women who go through infertility, then they change their job, or they change career, or they leave the place where they work because it doesn't represent them anymore. I think through this interrogation, I also became more aware of my needs. And I also left. I was an academic in the UK, and I left the UK because I realized I was in a toxic environment, higher education in the UK at that time, and also now. And I needed to go somewhere else, not just in another institution. I moved to another country, to Norway. And then, I mean, through also this process, I also realized, actually, I want to know more about trauma. I want to know more about what's happening in the background of this experience. And so now I'm also practicing a psychotherapist very much on the side. And something has happened also to my relationship to career, because for me, career was very much the corporate definition. It was a paid job, and it was a set of things to do. While for me now, career is about self-realization. And I identify less with my career and more with the meaning of what I do. And I've reoriented also what I do more towards what I love, rather than what pleases other people or fits into the boxes of an institution. So I do much more many more projects that are involved with activism, with trying to change society. For example, also using art as part of research. So I'm having more fun than I had before. Yes. So I'll leave it here.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't think I'm being dramatic when I say sociology saved my life, really. So I felt like I was just wandering in the world, not knowing what to do and where I was, and also my mum. I've mentioned my mum before, and without my mum, I wouldn't have got through any of it. But the studying of sociology, so it wasn't the career at first. It was the work that the way it stretched me and the way it made me think and the way it made me think differently about my place in the world and the way it helped me to challenge the taken for granted and the things that were expected of us, the norms that what we all must do. So the power of the discipline was kind of really important. And I think it's fair to say too that the career was kind of an accident, and I don't mean that flippantly. It was just that I didn't go into higher education. I was 28. Didn't go into higher education thinking, oh, I want a career as an academic. I was really, really lucky, and it just kind of. And I've seen a comment in the chat. I think it was Elaine saying that not everybody has the opportunity to be able to work on something that is so significant, important to them, and I feel completely privileged to have been able to spend so much time getting paid, to think about something that I and so many of us think is misunderstood and misrepresented. So I accept that it's a huge privilege, but I think the most significant thing about the career for me is, well, a couple of things. I mean, I would be false modesty not to say, I'm super honoured and humbled by the way in which I get such positive comments from people who found that my work was, useful in some ways for them. That's super lovely. But the other thing that has been really significant for me in terms of my career is the people that I've met and the relationships that I've built with people. So the people I've taught, more specifically, maybe the people I've supervised at doctoral level, and the people that I do quite a bit of mentoring now, the people that I mentor now. And through my work, I've made a whole group of loving friendships, essentially, that are from the career, but around it, if you see what I mean. So at times the actual career is quite challenging, and I'm very lucky now in that I'm essentially self-employed and work for myself, and I'm associated with various institutions. But for anyone now working in the public and the private sector, I guess, life can be really tough, can't it? But as Christina said, the work, being challenged is again, as I've said, really helpful and gets you through when times are difficult. My second husband, John, was a very loving relationship, but he was quite poorly for most of our relationship. And as well as supporting him, I worked, and the work helped me to do the caring work. And interestingly, he was a sociologist too. So even though he was poorly, he kind of encouraged my work too. So that was kind of complex. So the work was important. I'm privileged by the fact to have been able to spend so much time on something that I think is so important, and I'm eternally grateful for all the relationships that I've made and I'm still making. It makes me kind of heartful.
Thank you, Gail. I want to come to the next question, which is where hope, identity, and agency to change can be found. Where at least you were able to find hope, identity, and also your agency.
Can I go first? Is this one? Yeah. So where we were able to find hope and agency and change, well, again, I suppose kind of following on from what I've just said, it is through all of the work that I've done, and also through the relationships that I've made in my private personal life, let's say, I have realized that I've always argued in my work that ambivalence is a significant issue, and that whereas mothers and fathers are, although it still might be difficult for them, it's more easy for them to claim ambivalence than it is for the childless to stay that are ambivalent. Because if you're childless not by choice, that means you haven't tried hard enough. Or if you're childless by choice, it's your own fault if you're ambivalent because you made the wrong decision and all that. So I've always argued for the significance of ambivalence in our life, and as I get older, I realize my life is still ambivalent. So I reckon that I carry a loss with me that I will always have, and almost, maybe not every day, but certainly every week, I feel excluded or left out or reminded of my loss and my childlessness. But at the same time, I think that I'm living a joyful life. And I really appreciate that some of the things that I've done and been able to do might not have happened if I'd have had the children that I wanted. So I really recognise the complexity in that. I've found this last week really, of course, really influential and inspirational. And I was at Storyhouse Childless in Chester at the weekend, and now we've had a week of World Childless Week, and I've got lots of takeaways, but there's a couple of things, that one from each, that have made me think about the sort of hope and agency and change thing. And there was one discussion at Storyhouse Childless about whether or not creativity was a substitute for children, the children that we're not able to have, as it were, and how can we talk about our creativity in a way that isn't seen as a substitute. And that really made me think about my own creativity in and outside of the academy and through life. And is it a substitute? If it is, does it matter? All that kind of, I'm not sure. And I'd really like to think a bit more about that. I'd like to kind of play with that. And then there's been lots this week, but something struck me yesterday at the Gateway Elder Women discussion yesterday evening, lovely discussion. And there was a question in the chat, what if we don't want to do something big? What if we want to be low key? What if we don't want a big career, or we don't want to be creative, or we just want to be? And kind of indeed, of course. And it kind of made me think, whatever we do with our lives, however we want to live it, as long as we find a way to live it that we feel peaceful with, comfortable with, then that's good, isn't it? I mean, it's back to the we are worthy again. We are, whatever we do and whatever we choose to do, whether we think it's something big or not, or whether somebody else thinks it's something big or not. Did that answer the question?
And that gives also the opportunity to Christina to share her own insights.
Yes, yeah, for me, where hope, identity, and agency for change is really in connecting with oneself. And so that's the way it's been for me. And so career has facilitated me in connecting with myself, but also because I've used the opportunities that were there. So I could do research, and I decided, okay, I'm going to do research on this, and I'm going to try and access my emotions. And I think it's important to understand this, that, using actively career to pursue what makes us feel better, because a career is a double-edged sword. So it can also become a survival strategy. So it's very easy to just numb ourselves with a super busy schedule, and in order not to feel the grief, not to feel what we're going through. So, and use career as the substitute. So it's a substitute for feeling what we're feeling. But the problem is, if we don't honor our feelings, they will stay there. And what I realized is I needed to write about this, because I felt like this is starting to eat myself from the inside. I really started to feel this is turning into something really toxic. I'm going to get ill because of this. And yes, and so connecting with oneself in whichever way one can do that, I think it's really key. And I find that the more one connects with oneself, and then I also embarked on the whole therapy, psychotherapy education. And as part of the education, I needed to do psychotherapy for myself. So I went through a lot of psychotherapy, and I still do it because I feel it's maintenance that I need to do. And that really, what it does for me is to free myself from expectations and templates that exist out there. So the idea that is this a substitute is based on the assumption that we need to do certain things in order to be realized. Well, why? Where, who has established this? I don't need to do something big. I don't need to do anything at all. I can just simply do what makes me happy, what is meaningful to me. And so ultimately, connecting with the emotions then leads to freedom. What is really freedom? Like being free from the judgment of others. Well, in fact, no, it doesn't free us from the judgment of others, which is always there, but it frees us from this suffering that comes with the judgment, and from the idea that we need to fit into their expectations. Yes.
These are great points, Christina. And for you, Gail, also the things that you mentioned. In my own experience, yes, career can become a double-edged sword. Sometimes because it's so much connected, there is such a strong correlation with identity, or with stereotypes, with expectations and projections. In my latest research, I have met with some people that their career has been so entrenched into how they understand their own identity that they are so encapsulated in their working roles that they cannot overcome that. And one of the greatest gifts that we can do to ourselves is connecting with mental health support professionals, because this is the time and the space we can give these kind of experiences to be untangled, for us to come closer with our emotions. And what does that mean? How does impact and how does colors our perception of life, our perception of ourselves, as well as the expectations we have from our own, but also from others. So this is a crucial point. Coming to the next one, I would like to take the opportunity also, because there were so many questions actually and comments that they are coming into the Zoom space. Has anyone felt that a career is too late because so many years were taken trying to just have children while still somehow managing to function? Did any of you had this kind of feeling that career was taking up too many years of your life?
Sorry, that career was taking too many years.
Career is
Childless.
too late because so many years were taken trying to just have children while still somehow managing to function.
In my case, maybe the other way around, in the sense that I delayed trying to have a family because I was so taken up by my career, and I will never know whether I left it too late or not. I mean, I never tried earlier, so I don't know. Maybe I would have had the same problems, but I mean, I was always functioning because I forced myself. In fact, I was forcing myself to function even when I was really on the brink of my wits, really. Yeah. So
And for me, I mean, I did start trying quite young, and as I said, I was only pregnant the once, and although I would have pursued treatment, my husband at the time was not very keen on that idea. And then in my second relationship, it didn't really happen. But I guess it didn't happen. But I'd already started the career then, I guess. So and I was already kind of working on this. So that kind of protected me from additional grief, as it were. Not that I've said that the grief ever goes, because it doesn't ever go. And some of my work, as I've said, has been on mothers as well as non-mothers. So I'm interested in the different relationship between those who do and those who don't. And I'm very interested in a hierarchy of motherhood. So I spent quite a lot of time working with teenage parents I always say I started my career working with people who felt stigmatized because they didn't have children. Then I moved on to work with people who felt stigmatized because they did have children. And for a 10-year period, my second husband's two children lived with us. And that was very interesting in the way that people defined me as very definitely lesser in terms of the care that I was giving to them, even though it was quite significant, but it was defined very much as lesser. And I wrote a paper for a journal. And this is, I guess, in terms of our career, there are lots of ways in which we sometimes get challenged. For example, I went to a conference once where the keynote speaker said that, of course, you only really understood your own mother when you became a mother yourself. That was the keynote speaker at the conference I was at. I wrote a paper in which I described my relationship with John's sons, and I said that I had a parental relationship with my partner's two sons, and the journal editor, feminist journal editor, changed it to kind of parental relationship with my partner's two sons. So I went back and wrote parental relationship with my partner's two sons who live with us full time. So I had to justify my relationship with them, which was hugely interesting. So I guess I'm not quite sure I'm answering the question, but the career is the place where we work, like I know has come across a lot this week, is sometimes the place where it's hardest, even though at times it can be the place where you find solace, either through the work that you're doing or the relationships that you make. But I wouldn't say that I spent I've suffered what some people have suffered in terms of feeling that they spent so long that the career didn't happen. But because, as I've said, I just think the career, I was very lucky. The career was I got a grant. It was the age of grants. I had a grant for my first degree and my second degree. And then I quite easily got a job. And it's not like that now. I know it's not like that now for lots of people. So it's harder now.
That's true. Not very long ago, there was an article published by Melinda Gates, who was stating that we are sending our daughters into a workplace designed for our dads. And that is still the case. I mean, much of the women are spending their prime reproductive years trying to climb the corporate or organizational or academic ladder. And this is primarily because the workplace still functions to accommodate a world that meet the needs of men. So men do not have the same biological constraints like women do. In order to be able to get your education, your degrees, in order to get some experience and then becoming more and more successful professionally, you need to invest at least a decade in your professional life. So during this prime reproductive years of a woman, she is still fueling her path in the workplace, right? And after 30s, biology suggests that fertility rates start declining sharply, especially after the age of 35. So while women are still competing in an arena to promote their work, to become successful, they often are not aware that they are sacrificing their chances of becoming mothers. Now, there are also different factors for that, but I just wanted to highlight it. And in fact, almost half of successfully professional women in the Americas are childless not by choice, simply because they have to compete in uneven conditions with their male peers.
Mm.
And then once you become successful, also, there is the parenthood narrative that we grow up with, that there is a sequence of things that we need to follow. First, we need to get education, then we need to find a job, then we need to start investing ourselves, then we find a good partner, then we have a child. And often this is a myth. This is not necessarily the way things will happen or should happen. Because the more women become successful in their domains, the older they become, less options for partners, especially at the same level, let's say, of success to meet and interact, and less favorable conditions for them to conceive. So there are so many obstacles and hurdles and inequity things that we need to overcome if we are really to meet our goals.
And it's also important to be aware of the competing pressures on us all, isn't it? You know, that women can and should have it all. So we should be able to do all the things that are expected of us, and it's important to challenge that, you know, everybody should have a career, whatever a career is, as it were. And who decides what's a viable career and who decides what isn't. One of the things I'm finding really interesting at the moment is that, you know, the two questions that you get asked: do you have children? Which of course now for me is sometimes now, do you have grandchildren? And do you have a job? You know, do you have what do you do kind of thing? I'm getting asked the what do you do much less often, because people are assuming that whatever I did, I've given it up, which of course I haven't, because I've got so much more to do as far as I'm concerned. But the world is beginning to think that it's about time I gave it up. So that's quite interesting. I'm finding that quite interesting. Re-meeting the stereotypes, and as I think Christina said right at the beginning, childlessness is not something that ends, that you get over, you know, either when the treatment ends or you decide not to go for treatment or whatever, or you make a decision not to have a child. It's something that can come and go and have different significances at different points of your life.
But also, I mean, not having children affects our entire life in terms of the decision to buy a house, or who are we going to give our things to. So even when it doesn't involve children or grandchildren, or the grief returning, the consequences of not having a child are there always in the background of every single action we take every day, effectively for the rest of our lives.
Absolutely.
But if I can say something about the expectations, I mean, also in the academic career, I mean, if I look back now, also from this kind of insight that I've had this perspective about, abandoning other people's expectations. I don't understand why I was in so much of a hurry, why I was really in a race against time to get the promotion, to get to associate professor and then to professor. And when I look back at it now, I realize, why was I doing that? I mean, why should one do things so fast? And of course, and more we are under economic pressures that if you want to provide for a child, you need a good job with a good salary. But then I realized I could have taken completely different decisions, and I really bought into the expectations of society. And okay, I have forgiven myself because that's what we all do. But it is possible actually to develop a different perspective on it.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the other questions. So Melissa is asking, does any of your research show that the younger generation are choosing not to have children? They do not feel the pressure to conform to societal expectations, and they are happy just to pursue work career without feeling they are missing out. To be honest, does any of you would like to speak about that?
I actually don't have, I haven't done research on the new generation or people deciding not to have children, so I can't really speak about that.
No, me neither. I mean, I think there is there are more people speaking out in the media about childless not by choice and childlessness by choice. So I think there is more space for people to feel that they can share their experiences. But I wonder, I don't know whether people are feeling more comfortable or just more comfortable to admit it. I'm not sure about that. I think that might be interesting because, we know traditionally that people who make the decision not to have children have been defined as selfish. So, and to some extent that still exists. But I wonder, because there's a bigger community now around childlessness in general, including people who choose not to have children, that it's easier to come out, as it were, than it once was. But I mean, this has come up a few times this week, and certainly I'm reminded of it again and again. I do feel that some of the ways in which we're represented in the media, specifically in fiction and drama, and is getting worse rather than getting better. So many times I watch a drama and you find out at the end that the villain was a childless woman again and again and again, or a biologically childless woman. So it might be somebody who's caring for children, but they're baddies really. And I was watching the new version of, is it Snow White? This is a new one of them anyway, can't remember. One of the Disney's, this new version. And I was struck by the fact that it's really interesting now that often the young heroine is feisty and she doesn't need the prince to save her anymore because she can save herself and she can fight off. But the wicked stepmother, who of course is biologically childless, is still the wicked stepmother. There's no subtlety around that. So the negative stereotypes persist and still need us to challenge them again and again, I think. But because of communities like this, I think there's more spaces for people to talk and to share and to talk about the other things in their life that are significant and the other bits of their identity that are meaningful.
Thank you, Gail. Although I also myself, I'm not involved with the child-free research community. I do know, because I obviously have to investigate and establish some baseline for my own research, that fertility rates are plummeting globally. And also because I am based in Asia, I know also that it's a prevalent policy issue, especially for Southeast Asia, for countries like Korea, Japan, Singapore, and others as well. Also because I'm originally from Greece, I know Greece has the first place, unfortunately, in fertility rate droppings in Europe. So very soon it's going to become a society of elders. But apparently, this has to do with a number of different factors, including societal perceptions, including also environmental factors, and a number of different things. So this is something that I guess we have to expect that it's going to be discussed more and more often in the near future. But the good thing is that we do have a lot of different ideas, a lot of different discussions for what concerns the childless not by choice people, which is why we are gathering all today here.
And we have each other in a way that we haven't in the past, I think.
Absolutely.
The community is thanks to Steph and others, we have a growing community that is that can only be good. And and I feel like every webinar I go to, every piece of beautiful writing I read, I feel like I feel really frustrated that I'm still having to say, and we're all having to say, some of the things that I've been saying for 35 years. I feel really frustrated, but I feel so full of hope that there are so many more of us now sharing and talking and researching and thinking, and that we have each other.
Christina, any final comments from you?
Just yeah, I mean, I can just add to what Gail said. I mean, about having a community, and I mean, yes, I was reading also. I was trying to read the comments also in the chat, and they were talking about, I guess, a chosen family. And so, yes, we don't have our own biological children, but yeah, we are mothers and fathers in our own way, in different ways, and we have our communities and our network, and yes, and so yeah, I feel like I'm a happy childless woman.
Christina, there is one question for you. Is your research worldwide or for Norway?
I don't understand the question, because I mean, it's accessible from outside Norway. I mean, I don't do research about Norway in particular, so my research is always more international. Yeah, so I hope I have answered.
Well, from my end, since we are coming to the top of the hour, I want to thank everyone for being here with us today. Christina, Gail, and also a warm thanks to Stephanie and the efforts that she has put to bring us all together under one roof. Thank you very much. And as we mentioned at the beginning, once the link to the video of the session is made available, Stephanie will publish also a set of resources that we collated, so you can access them and enjoy some reading.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Cindy, for organizing, and for the audience for being here today.
Thank you so much.